Hey everybody, it is time once again for another Rahdo Q&A. And hello everybody, I'm about to answer a bunch of questions submitted by folks like you to the email address questions@rahdo.com. And by all means, folks, if anything I talk about or my wife talks about, because she sometimes shows up on these as well, prompts any further questions from you, well, you know what to do. Questions@rahdo.com is the email address. Keep them coming, folks. I want to hear your cues so I can AM. And speaking of which, let's get right to it. But, folks, I'm going to talk about several different topics today, and if any of them don't really strike your fancy, don't worry. There are links down in the show notes that let you jump around from question to question so you can listen to just the parts you're interested in. All right, sound good? Then let's go. Nathan says, you mentioned trying to delete from collections and how many clicks it takes. Yes, I did. It's annoying as all get out. In my opinion, that delete button isn't delete from collection so much as it is delete from my database. If you untick own, that will remove it from your collection, but the data is still in your database, including when you acquired it, removed it, price, ratings, etc. I only use RFC when I get a new game delivered to remove before I click own because I like to sort by date, newest on top. And if I don't reset the data, please advise if I'm confused wrong. No, I think you're right. But here's the thing. That data you're talking about is of no use to me. Let's take a look at my collection, shall we? I have on my shelves high 400s, not quite 500 games. But if we come back to Board Game Geek and we go to Rahdo, and isn't collection here? Yes, collection. I have in my collection, it's coming, it's thinking about it, 3,434 games. And I'm here to tell you, I do not own 3,434 games. Now, let's see. We can sort this a little bit. I can filter. If I say board games, right, that's board games, but let's just say previously owned. Of the 3,400 games that are in my collection, this is interesting. I genuinely don't know what the answers are going to be here. I'm curious. 1,200 of them, so a third of them, are games I've previously gotten. So 2/3 of my 3,400 games in my collection are previously owned. Now, if I go to owned, board games, not previously owned, but owned, so owned, that is... I was just shy. 494 games. So, that is what? I'm up to like 1,800 games now of 3,400 games. So, what are all those other freaking games in my collection? You can imagine that the vast majority of them, what were your things? I don't care about the acquired, removed, price ratings, etc. I don't need that information. And it's so hard for me to remove them because removing any of them requires 5 clicks if I stumble across them on the page. Now, to be fair, it's very quick. If I remove them here, if I just click this, it's one and done. It's removed from my collection permanently. What are all those games? How can I... Right, so, owned. No, things I don't own and that I don't have pre-ordered. What if I do that? And if I don't have previously owned? That's probably going to get me the 1,700 or 1,800 I was just talking about, right? No, there's 1,000 of them. Now, what are these? The vast majority of these are things on my wish list. Things on my wish list that at some point or other, I looked at big bad Fabies from 2020. Something about that caught my eye. I don't know what the heck it is in 2020, and I put it on my wish list as a 4 thinking about it. I don't need that information. If for some reason I were to come across big fat Fabies, not fat babies, but big fat, what is big bad Fabies? Fables. My eyes, the lowercase L looked like an eye to me. Big bad Fables. I don't know what this is. Apparently it never came out. It was self-published. It was a bag deck building game. And here's the deal. If I don't need this. I don't need this information. This is I have over 1,000 games like this. And if I want to get rid of them, I got to blah, and blah, and then blah, and then blah, and then blah, and then blah. Was that 5? That's ridiculous. It's absurd. Now, granted, I could also get rid of them. And to be fair, it is something I do occasionally. I'm probably way overdue for it. Usually, I don't think you'd see many 4s that I've got on my wish list that are older than 2020. Because probably at some point, everything that was, it looks like 2020. Is there a 2019 that is a 4, 2019? No, that's a previously owned. I got rid of previously owned. Wow, whatever. Long story short, my collection is very strange. Because that's what I do. I see a game, I'm interested in it, I subscribe to it, because I check my subscriptions on Board Game Geek multiple times every day. And if apparently nobody ever posts, let's go back to Big Bad Fables. Big Bad Fables. I don't think it ever came out. It says 2 people have owned it. There's a video how to play it, probably done by the developer himself. Nobody has ever commented on it. 2 people have commented and rated it. Apparently it was on Kickstarter. I backed it in 2024. Somebody said that. And in 2023, I don't know what's going on here. Maybe it will eventually come out someday. But apparently, since I added it in 2020 to my wish list, no information has bubbled up that would make me come back and say, I really need to check this game out. It's time for me to delete it. And that's why it's so annoying to have to click 5 times, which is why every once in a while I do a big mass culling of older 4s. Because if they haven't somehow bubbled up to my consciousness, in 5 years, in 4 years or 3 years, they probably never will. So I get rid of them. Anyway, you didn't really ask a question, but I didn't give you an answer. I just pointed out how weird I am in my relationship with Board Game Geek. I think I use this in many ways differently than most people who are on Board Game Geek. Anyway, moving on. Rachel says, I've been watching you for about a year. I've only gotten to board games in the last 2 years. Love your content. You're so lovely, kind, patient, and thoughtful. Well, thank you, Rachel. Thank you very much. I agree with you. I have a very low tolerance for games with a lot of mean stuff with attacking other players. Your exuberant enthusiasm was a little exhausting for me at first, but it is infectious and delightful. Not everybody agrees. But thank you again. I'm glad you're the way you are. Anyway, for the first time ever, I have 2 questions. That's very nice. Thank you, Rachel. Question number 1. In questions and answer number 29, you said, I think I'm in the minority, but most people are making gut instinctual, just click on the button there and it'll show up in a week and, oh crap, I didn't like this decisions. I remember talking about this at some point that I worry that in my experience, I have seen such a meteoric rise of board game TikTok as yet another reason that board game YouTube is floundering a bit. And obviously that's people just watching quick 2-minute videos. And I do believe most people watch board game media to help them decide if they're going to buy a game. Number 1 reason, help them decide if they're going to buy a game. Number 2 reason, help them figure out how to play a game. That's why Rodney Smith is king of the world, because he monopolized the how to play space. And he was Johnny on the spot and not for nothing, did an amazing job at it. And he continues to do an amazing job to this very day. But talk about right place at the right time. Whereas me, my approach was always, I'm not here to teach you how to play the game. The number of times I have over the years had to type, look, I'm really sorry this doesn't work for you, but I'm not trying to teach you how to play the game. If you already have the game, it's too late. Go watch Rodney or somebody else, because I was just trying to help you decide if you wanted to buy the game. Anyway, though, not that I don't think my videos do help. I don't think my videos teach games at all, but they help you learn the games, because if you watch my run through, you will find it very easy to read the rule book afterwards, because you've been introduced, I think, in a very naturalistic and human way to all the ups and downs and pitfalls of the gameplay. And then when you read about them in the rule book, that just cements what I showed you. And chances are you'll find some places I made mistakes too, which is why you always turn on those Klingon subtitles. Anyway, Rachel continues. This leaves me with a burning question. Are most people really just that rich and free with their money to throw it around on expensive luxury items like board games upon a whim? If I did things like that, then I wouldn't be as well off as I am. Every game I buy, I probably put 1 to 3 hours into it with research about the game before I ever get any hours into actually playing it. Plus, usually a week or 2 of sleeping on the idea before ordering anything. I find it so very difficult to believe that there are huge numbers of people out there who can just throw $80 at some random game they saw something about for 2 minutes. That doesn't seem normal or sustainable to me, not grounded in reality. Rachel, it's the truth. You are the exception to the rule, Rachel. And I was like you when before I started. I mean, I couldn't afford to buy all the games I wanted to play. That's why I started the channel. I've always been very upfront about that. But anyway, the reality is, one of the things that makes our industry such a tiny, tiny, tiny little niche on the pop culture landscape is because the average board gamer is a middle-aged dude with a lot of disposable income. That has always been, by far, the biggest demographic of board game consumption. Well, actually, no, that's not true. The biggest demographic of board game consumption is little kids and people buying cheap games at a toy store for their little kids. That dwarfs everything else. But then the second biggest one is middle-aged dudes with a lot of disposable income. That is the target audience. And those are guys who are sitting at their house surrounded by 500 or plus games and yet don't think twice about throwing $80 on the table for something because they saw some 2-minute video that said, oh, this looks amazing. And they say, I got to have it. And they may or may not ever play it. Now, I'm not saying that represents the majority of players, but it represents the majority of sales. At least, I should say, for the kind of games I play, for the kind of games that are covering my wall. Obviously, this isn't true in the party game space, right? There, you've got a totally different demographic, a totally different sales, a totally different, value proposition. But yeah, it's not at all uncommon that, chances are, if you've made it to middle age successfully, you've got disposable income. Not necessarily, but if you do have disposable income, and a lot of middle-aged folks do, yeah, that was a BS statement. Chances are not that if you made to middle age that you have a lot of disposable income. Not at all. That's not in our world. I don't even know why I said that. But if you have a lot of disposable income, yeah, then you don't think twice about throwing $80 at a game that maybe you'll keep, maybe you won't, maybe you'll play, maybe you won't. And that is the norm. I think so much of board game sales are driven by that demographic of the player base. And so many games just get played once or twice and then moved on. Those are the players, by and large, who are driving the FOMO. The normie, who was exposed to Catan, and ended up buying a copy of Catan, and bought a copy of Pandemic, and bought a copy of Wingspan, and maybe bought an expansion, but probably not, but maybe bought an expansion because they really liked Wingspan and they really enjoyed playing it with their mom or whatnot. That's a tiny percentage of the overall sales of modern designer board games. Now, of course, the overall sales of modern designer board games are, by and large, with a few exceptions, dwarfed by the sales of mass market games because, again, the number one target audience of board games is still young children. But yeah, it is the case. Based on my observations, I could be wrong. I can certainly tell you that what the heck? Let's go back. As I think I do have some statistics about this, at least as it relates to my channel. Where's my analytics tab? Where is my audience? Okay, DTT. Yeah, here we go. Browser. Okay, this is the audience for Rahdo run through. DTT. Here's an odd thing about my channel, by the way, folks, which just goes to show how absolutely abhorrent my thumbnail game is. Most channels do not have 50% of their views from subscribers and 50 not subscribed. Most channels, it is the overwhelming majority. It's just why they're always shouting, subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. My thumbnails, you will notice my thumbnails, generally speaking, aren't completely inundated with clickbaity type things. I do it a little bit, but for the actual run-throughs, I don't. I just let the art in the game speak for itself, which is why most of my views, or 50% of my views, are for subscribers. And that's good. But anyway, here's the age and gender. 86% male, 35 to 44. Almost 40% of my audience is middle-aged. And then if you go from 35 to 55, it goes to, 70% of my audience is middle-aged. 12 or 13% of my audience watches Klingon subtitles. Come on, folks, turn on those Klingon subtitles. Only 13%. Paula works hard on those, and he's hilarious. It is well worth pushing the little button, the CC button. That's all you got to do. This is another weird thing about me. I don't think this is all normal. 35% of my audience is the U.S., and then the other 65% is not England and Germany. It's all around the world. I think that is a reflection of the fact that I started out in Europe. So I think I have a slightly more international audience. I think most of my competitors, they would not say, 30% of my audience is in the US. Most people, it's like 50 or 60% of their audience in the US. So, but anyway, I just pointed this out because right there, 86% male. What is this? 50. over 60% middle-aged, 70%. What is it? 85% male, 70% middle-aged and above are watching my videos. And they are also the ones who are buying all of these games that I am surrounded by. And that's also where the majority of the money in society is held by those people. And that is why so many of these games are literal impulse purchases. Not as useful, perhaps, as a actual sales data that you could get from a publisher, but it's kind of where I'm coming from. Okay, 2. Whilst I like seeing the pretty backgrounds with all the board games, I do feel it's problematic that so many board game channels out there use board games in Calyx shelves as their background, because it makes it seem like it's normal to have thousands of dollars worth of games surrounding a person. It sets up an unspoken expectation that if viewers want to be like that person they're watching, then they too need to accumulate enough games to fill several Calyx units. I do appreciate channels like Dice Tower, Actual All Before You Play, Board Game Sanctuary, who use very simple backgrounds, or backgrounds with just a couple of games visible behind in a nice display. Yours is a fun and colorful background of games, and it's a very logical sort of set design to have, but I do wonder whether you've considered this aspect of unspoken messaging you're sending out. Anyway, then Rachel concludes with, "You're wonderful. Thank you for all your work, kindness, and bravery." Thank you again. It's let's go back. And again, I apologize. I know this is a podcast and the majority of people will hear this and not see it, but you've seen my channel, right? You know what it looks like. Yeah. One thing that I think is important, that is important about mine, I have to admit, I originally, let's just go ahead and remove Everdell Far Shore. Boop. Nope. And then Anno 1800 behind it. It used to be all my shelves just had all the games made up. No, that's not a good one. I am failing. Come on. All right, there we go. Yeah. Or so it used to be my shelves were all filled up like that, right? More like a library, because I really like that. I like the idea of showing all my games there. Like I had a problem and I was an obsessive board game collector because I really enjoyed role-playing I'm a rich aristocrat who has a gigantic library, but instead of hundreds and hundreds of books to impress all the hoi polloi, I've got hundreds and hundreds of board games. And I admit, there's no two ways about it. I was definitely sending that message, because if you go back 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, I'm not quite sure when I made the switch, 3 or 4 years ago, you would see not what this is what? Less than 12, 24, not quite dozens. Instead of seeing dozens of games behind me, you would see literally hundreds of games behind me, because I thought it was cool. Then, a few years ago, it occurred to me, I'm out of space. These Calyx shelves stacked that way can only hold maybe about 300 games, and I've got around 500 games. And that's when and you'll notice, that's when I shoved everything way back, and then put games in front of them. It was literally a space-saving exercise. But it had the unintended side effect of looking really, really cool on camera. And I have noticed more and more, it used to be everybody did the sideways thing, and there were very few like this. But then after I started doing this, you see it more and more. I tend to be a real trendsetter in board game media. I invented Klingon subtitles that everybody uses now, and I started doing monthly roundups, whatever it was, 6 years. Before I started doing it, nobody was doing monthly roundups. Now everybody does them. That's to be expected. Me and Tom and Rodney, and a few other people, we're the OGs. We've been around forever. We have the most subscribers and whatnot. So it's to be expected. But anyway, so I made this change first as just a personal practicality thing, so I could feed my beast even more by having room for more games. But it was immediately so obvious that, as you yourself say, this is just lovely and wonderful and colorful. Now, here's the thing. I would be willing to bet you that most casual people who might stumble across a Rahdo Final Thoughts talking about a game that they're thinking about buying, see this. None of them have any expectation that there are, in fact, anywhere from 5 to 20 games hidden behind each one of these games, depending on which shelf it is and where I put all the little tiny games and whatnot. Most people probably figure, oh, wow, he's got a lot of games. Does he have 50 games? That's crazy. What kind of person has 50 board games? But I can see them all right there. So I think my switch that started from a practicality thing, but then became just a presentation style, I think does somewhat counteract, because I think most people would assume, yeah, there's no way that I could literally have, I mean, that is shelf 1, that's shelf 2. Just beyond right here, this line, shelf 3 is right there with just as many and all each cube filled up. Nobody has any expectation of that. So hopefully I am not feeding that FOMO. I mean, not that I don't do it in a lot of ways anyway, but hopefully I'm not subconsciously, sending that message of consume, buy. Hopefully people don't have to put on their, what was it? They Live, the glasses. It says consume and buy everywhere in the Roddy Piper movie. I can't think of the name of it now. I think it was They Live. Anyway, though, but it's certainly true. I guess if in fact my assumption is correct, and most people, because what are we looking at? We're looking at 12 there, another 12 or so here. So we're looking at, is this less than 30 games on screen? Is that a message, Rachel? I don't think that's a particularly bad one. I don't think owning 30 games, I think that's probably a line where people who really get into it probably stop there. Well, I mean, there's several lines, right? I mean, there's going to be people who are exposed and they think, oh, this is really great, and they just get a game or two. The game they played with their friend and they have that, and maybe they play it once or twice a year and don't really think about it. And then there's like the next stage, people who are like, oh, this is a lot of fun. This is something I could start seeing. I mean, heck, this is a continuation of last month. There was a question that came in about how many games is too many, and then Jen was in the conversation and it evolved, it evolved, I should say, into a more of a discussion of what is an enthusiast versus a hobbyist versus a fanatic or whatever. People are still commenting on that one because a lot of people agreed with Jen and not me, and that's cool. I might have overstated my case, as I do from time to time. But, I mean, at some point, there's, at some level, 30-some games doesn't seem like an insanely unhealthy. A curated collection of 30 or so games does not seem obsessive to me. Now, if I still had all these, side out, so if anybody looked at this, they would see, oh my God, does he literally have 150 games sitting behind him? That is, I would say, an unhealthy number. It's to a normal person, they would look at it and say, well, that's just weird and absurd, and there's something strange about them. And I certainly would not want to make anybody feel that, they are a lesser gamer if they don't own at least 150 games. I don't want anybody to feel they're a lesser gamer if they own 30 games or 3 games or no games and they just play with their friends. It doesn't matter. They're all just here to have fun. I certainly don't want to pass judgment on anybody. I do think it's an interesting perspective. I guess I'm just thinking I probably am not feeding that beast too terribly much, or at least not as much as I used to, because I'm only showing 30 games. Oh, the other thing too, games cycle in and out of this all the time. I really do like doing this. I mean, Daybreak is the most recent one. When I discovered Daybreak is the best game of 2023, and it eclipsed right above it Earth, and Earth is now my number 2, and Daybreak is my number 1. I'm like, okay, well, I got to put that in front because I love it so much. Zhanguo, we played this on, and I was just so excited. I mean, a lot of these are just the ones I'm happiest about, and I really just want to say, well, look at these things. They're so, not only do they look lovely, but they're just some of my most favorite-y, top of my head favorites. So, I mean, because I know these particular games, I mean, I really should charge for it, quite frankly. They are getting, a lot of front attention. But anyway, it's neither here nor there. Right. So, so to your original question, sorry, because your question certainly prompted me to be a bit reflective in all that. Let's go back to this. Have I considered this aspect of the unspoken message? I had never considered it before. Again, you've seen the thought process that went into my decision-making about what I present. I do think it's a valid point. I 100% agree it is a valid point. And it doesn't do anybody any favors to try to suggest subliminally. Is it subliminal? It's liminal. You can see it. But, low-key suggest that this is the way it should be. Because, I mean, it is. It's aberrant to have so many games. It's not bad. If it makes you happy, it can't be that bad, is one of my fundamental guiding principles in life. And so I certainly do not disparage anybody. Hey, if somebody owns 2,000 games, if it makes you happy, that's great, even if you never play any of them in there. I mean, if it makes you happy to own them, just the tactile nature of owning them, that's great. I'm happy you found something that made you happy. But it is, I think you bring up a valid point. I don't know if I have an answer, but thank you for the observation. And oh my gosh, boom, that's it, folks. We are now about to move on to Jen's questions. There are only a few that came in this month, so hang on. We'll be right back with the love of my life. Okay, folks, Jen is here.
Hello!
Hi, Honey Pie. And she has brought Daisy and some tea.
Tea and Daisy.
There are not supposed to be any dogs in here, and yet somehow Jen always ends up bringing one in to spread the fur everywhere.
Oh, yes.
And she doesn't deny it. Okay, we're going to continue. We've got a couple more game stuff, and then afterwards we go to the personal section. Honey Pie.
Yes.
Brett says, sounds like you and Jen had a great time at the Dice Tower West this year, especially Jen, who got to play games and not worry about being a vendor. Do you see yourselves attending conventions in the future when you've retired from the show? If moving back to the UK, will you attend the UK Games Expo as a fan, just to get in lots of gaming with other hobbyists? So that's obviously a question to you.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I did have a really good time. It was kind of fun just to play games.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and have no responsibilities. Yeah. So, I don't know. One of the problems this year was getting back in time to do Dice Tower West, as far as dropping off all the games that we had in the rig that we'd played and filmed and stuff. Because I would have liked to have stayed a little longer in Baja. And so the timing wasn't perfect. And so I'm not sure. I think what I learned is I don't want to have to, when I'm off on the road, maybe I don't want to have to be as motivated by events or scheduling or timing in the future. And that could change after we've been RVing for longer than, what we have been. I could see that there would be a benefit to knowing you want to be somewhere at some point, and that would inform your entire journey. But at this point, I want to be the journey. I don't want the journey to be dictated by other things. So for right now, I don't think that would be something I would necessarily be trying to schedule around, but I could see in the future that maybe it would be.
Does that mean you don't want to do Funagon 2, Electric Boogaloo?
Well, that was a very nice convention. But again, it made us have to leave at a certain time, and I was not quite ready to leave at that particular time last year. Okay. My dahlias were still looking wonderful. And yeah, I felt rushed. Okay. So.
Interesting. Okay, and then James has a very simple question. Can a game be so bad, instead of selling it or giving it away, you actually throw it in the trash?
Well, the only game I think that has been in our lives that has been that bad, you would have to address that, because it was Bob, I can't think of the painting guy.
Bob Ross.
Bob Ross, yes.
The Art of Chill.
Yep.
I didn't think that was warranted throwing away. It went to the Dice Tower West Convention Library, of course.
So, I guess no, it cannot be so bad.
You can't think of any game that would be so bad it deserves to be thrown away.
No, but I'm not very good at that. You would be far better at that.
Okay.
I know that there was one game when we were in Malta that just kicked your butt when you were reading the rules and stuff, and it was just awful trying to get through figure out how the game played and everything. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
No.
Oh, yeah, well. And
do you remember anything about it?
No, I don't.
Did we play it?
Yeah, we did end up playing it, but, I mean, you just had such a hard time.
Did we play it with David and Angela?
No, it was just between you and me. So that narrows it down to only about 1,000 games.
Give or take.
So, and I think at points you were just ready to throw that game away completely because the rules were so awful.
Okay. Well, yeah, no, James, I guess I was going to say no. I wouldn't expect that would be the case. But because my inclination is to just give anything to the Dice Tower West Convention Library so that other people... I do firmly believe that there is a player for every game. Not necessarily a game for every player, but a player for every game. But Jen does bring up the point. I wonder what it was. I'm thinking it might have been Myth. I think Myth is probably the worst experience I've ever had with board game rules. But we played that one with David and Angela, so...
Oh, well, maybe. It's hard for me to know, for sure. I'm impressed that I could remember it was in Malta.
So I guess that would probably be the one unconscionable sin. A rule book that is so bad that I would not wish it on my worst enemy. And therefore it should not go to the Dice Tower West Convention, but should be thrown away. But even the worst game of all time for rules, Myth, I think, maybe there's been one that's worse, but I'm hard pressed to think of it. I would probably still give that, because I'm sure there'd be a lot of people who would want to play it at the library, at the convention. So no, I'm kind of hard pressed. But maybe there's some weird little trifle of a game that somehow is so incredibly unplayable because it's got such an abhorrent rule book. But such a thing probably doesn't exist. So I think that's it, folks. There were not very many questions, gaming-wise, that I thought would really work for Jen. So we are done. But if you hang out, we'll be right back with some personal questions right after this. And that will be the end of this session of the Rahdo Q&A. Thank you, folks, for watching and also for submitting your questions. Send me more to the email address questions@rahdo.com, and I'll get you covered in a future episode. And in the meantime, if you would like to hear some more, you're in luck. I have been doing the Rahdo Talks Through audio podcast for years now with my wife, Jen, and we have got hundreds of hours for you to enjoy. You can hit that big box that's on screen right now if you want to dive deep. Also, you can go on ahead and subscribe so you won't miss the next Rahdo Q&A. And thank you, folks, for watching, for listening. Have a very, very nice day. Talk to you later. So long. Bye-bye.